I'm Seth Grossman for libertyandprosperity.com, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about our group and how we stumbled across something, some wisdom that Ben Franklin over there figured out 300 years ago. And that is that Americans were a very smart people, a well-informed people, and that Americans, when it came to government or public issues, usually were smarter and made better decisions than the elite nobles and nobility of Europe, who had special training and special expertise in, quote, the affairs of state. So what Ben Franklin discovered is that when people openly are not afraid to tell you what's on their mind, when they really don't care, whether it helps them or hurts them, they just want to talk about the truth, that you will make some smart decisions. Because if there's something that you say, if you keep it to yourself, you'll always believe it to be true. But if you say something, even if it's something stupid to somebody else, they could point out how you're mistaken. And then when you think about it, you say, gee, I am mistaken. You get correct information. You get smarter. And by the same token, you may know something better than somebody else. And then when you get together and have these honest conversations, you get smarter. Now, tragically, we just had a disaster in Afghanistan where we had the finest experts, military generals. We had experts in Middle Eastern affairs, Islamic affairs, all sorts of international relations. And they said they were completely surprised that the Afghan government, the Afghan army that we supported for 20 years just collapsed in less than 2 weeks. How did it happen? How could they be so surprised when this little breakfast group that we have, meeting every Saturday morning at 9:30 at Sal's Cafe in Somers Point, New Jersey, we could see this coming for years. So what is it that we discovered that our military and international experts and the United Nations expert could not figure out? It's an interesting story. You see, our group, every September 4th, we hold a ceremony and a teaching of the story of Richard Somers, who was born here in Somers Point and died at the age of 26 in Tripoli in that little-known war called the Barbary War. And the war took place because there were 4 kingdoms in North Africa. They started attacking American ships as soon as we became independent. They would seize the ships, they would seize the cargo, they would take the ships, the cargo, the passengers, the crew back to North Africa, and then they'd sell the passengers and crew into slavery, a lifetime of slavery, unless the host country or somebody would put up ransom to buy their people back again. And this is something that these Barbary kingdoms have been doing for basically 700 years at that time. And so when America saw this happening, we had our ambassadors in Europe. We had Thomas Jefferson. We had John Adams. They asked the pirates, why are you doing this? We didn't do you any harm. And of course, the answer they got in London in 1785 was, well, we are followers of the Prophet Muhammad. We believe that anyone who does not follow our prophet is a sinner, and therefore it's our duty to make war against them and to, we don't have to kill them, but we can enslave them and we can do what we want with them because that's what is written in our Quran. Of course, Thomas Jefferson was shocked by this. That's how he got the English translation of the Quran, put it in his library. And so we would tell the story of Richard Somers in this manner every year, every September 4th. But except for 1 year, about 7 years ago, we had an expert, a historian, who said we had it all wrong. And, oh, by the way, we would also say that, see, now we understand why we were attacked, why America was attacked on September 11th. We now understand why we can't make deals or compromises or nation building with people who have been trained in this doctrine. We were having these ceremonies after September 11th, and now we understood why we were attacked, and that the only way we could win is to fight our enemy and to beat them and defeat them, and basically kill them until they finally agree that they will leave us alone, which is what we did in the Barbary Wars of 1801 to 1805. But anyway, the professor said, no, we were wrong. And he said, these people didn't do it out of jihad. They just did it because they were a poor country, and American ships had lots of money. We didn't have a navy at the time to protect our people. So it was nothing personal. It was nothing religion. It was just business. And they pointed out that if it was jihad, the Barbary kings and they were part of what was called the Turkish Ottoman Empire, the sultans. They lived lives of luxury. They had no trouble at all living with non-believers, with Christians, with Jews. All they cared about was making money, and therefore we were totally wrong in the way we looked at the Barbary Wars. So here we had a professor criticizing us, and we felt bad about it. But then we did more research, and we found something very interesting. And what we found is, yes, the professor was right. The leaders of the Barbary kingdoms had forgotten about the jihad. They had forgotten about the holy war. They were in it for the money. In fact, many of the slave raiders that they sent out, instead of trying to win new lands for Islam, they'd send their slave ships up to Iceland to bring blonde-haired, blue-eyed women back to Turkey to give as presents to the Sultan. So they would smoke hashish. They had this whole corrupt lifestyle. And it's true, they were not into jihad at all. But there's something else we discovered. We discovered that although the rulers had given up on jihad, and although the elites in this part of the Islamic world were perfectly happy living with Jews and Christians and making money and living the good life, there were preachers saying that this is the reason why the Christian world was defeating the Islamic world, and that they had to change. And in particular, there was a preacher in Arabia called Muhammad al-Wahhab. And Wahhab taught that you can't go by these rulers who are saying get along with everybody. It was the duty of every Muslim to read the Quran, which is the book that Muhammad got from the angel Gabriel. And you have to read another book called the Hadith, which are, they were written by people who lived at the time of Muhammad, writing down what he said and did. So the Hadith is the actions and words of Muhammad, and the Quran is the word of God, of Allah, that was given to Muhammad. That you have to read these books yourself to know what a good Muslim is supposed to do. And if you read these two books, you can come to no other conclusion that you have to dedicate your life to jihad. That is, to make sure that the entire world is converted to Islam, and that anyone who is not of that faith has to be enslaved or killed. And this is the doctrine of Wahhab. In many ways, Wahhab was very much like Martin Luther, where he said you can't go to what the priests tell you to do. You can't go to what the Pope tells you what to do. Of course, Martin Luther said every Christian has to be his own priest, read the Bible by him or herself. You have to know how to read. You have to read the Bible. You have to have Bible discussion to know what God wants us to do. That's what Martin Luther and the Protestants did in Europe. And Wahhab, in many ways, was doing the same thing. He was like the Reformation of the Islamic world. In many ways, Martin, copied after Martin Luther, but with one big difference. The tradition we got with Christian Bible study was that you have 10 people read a passage of the Bible, you get 10 different opinions, you have discussion, you have argument, you have back and forth, and you have to have tolerance, you have to have different opinions, people have to agree to disagree, and really that process led to the learning process that, of course, Benjamin Franklin figured out, and that helped European Christians advance. That brought us the Enlightenment. It brought us the Industrial Revolution, the Scientific Revolution, the Age of Exploration. A lot of good things came out of it. Of course, in Arabia with Wahhab, what Muhammad taught was he was the last prophet, meaning whatever he said is God's word and it cannot be changed. And if anybody dares to say, if Muhammad were alive today, well, he may see things a little bit differently. Because if you dare to do that, what you're doing is you are claiming to be a prophet yourself, and the penalty for that is instant death. You're guilty of apostasy. So the preaching of Wahhab was a very violent interpretation of Islam. It was a very intolerant and violent. And that, again, Wahhab lived in the 1700s, just about the time that Richard Summers and the Americans came in contact with the Barbary pirates. So yes, on the one hand, you had the rulers who were just in it for the money, but you had the ordinary people saying, we have a duty to save the Islamic world. We have to get back to the word of Muhammad, and we have to be violent, we have to be intolerant, because it's our duty as Muslims to enslave or kill anybody who is not Muslim. And now, what we find that when Wahhab was bringing this new doctrine in the Islamic world, where the Arabs were had it right, they knew what Muhammad was all about. The Turks, the Ottoman Empire, the Barbary pirates had it wrong. They were just misusing the Quran to rob and steal and plunder and use their money on hashish and women. That was a very, very bad thing as far as the Arabs were concerned. And so they had this resentment towards the Turks. Now, Wahhab, of course, was a preacher. He was a scholar. But he teamed up with another powerful man in Saudi Arabia, a warlord or a prince, and his name was Muhammad ibn Saud, the Saud of the Saudi Arabians. So basically, you had Wahhab was the religious leader who was saying why it was important for Arabs and Muslims to fight anyone who was not of their faith. And it was the House of Saud who put it into practice. And he was a fierce and ruthless warrior. And between the two of them, and by the way, they lived and died in the 1700s, but they all had children. And their disciples and their children continued that tradition for the next 300 years, where Saudi Arabia, the Saudi family ran the politics, they ran the warriors, they ran the army, and spiritually, it was the followers of Wahhab who were in charge of the religion. And for years and years, they just lived them out there in the desert, nobody really caring what they were doing. But all that changed just before World War I, when the Germans and the British came in and discovered oil in Saudi Arabia. So now you had this powerful warriors, you had soldiers, you had this doctrine of making total war against anyone who is not a follower of the Prophet Muhammad. Now suddenly that money bought a lot of influence. It bought influence with the Germans, the Europeans, the English, and suddenly this force became extremely powerful in Saudi Arabia. But then there's another part of the story, this Wahhab story, that I never realized until I noticed, and by the way, all this came up in discussions that we were having with Liberty and Prosperity. As we studied Wahhab and the Saudis and all that, we found out something interesting. As you know, every follower of Muhammad has a duty once in his or her lifetime to make a pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca. and come there. And in the year 17, let's see when it was, 1730, you had a man from India, a man called Syed Ahmad, comes from India. He comes to make his pilgrimage, and he decides to stick around and study in Arabia, in Medina, for about a year and a half. And he comes into contact with Wahhab, the hard-line guy, and he becomes fascinated with this. And basically, the Indian guy from Delhi, India, Syed Ahmad, becomes a disciple of this extreme violent form of Islam, or as they would say, it's the authentic Islam, because they're doing and saying exactly what the Prophet Muhammad did back in the 600, back 1400 years ago. So he takes this doctrine back to India, and within just a few years of having this doctrine back in India, suddenly there are uprisings, there are attacks by people who are Muslim in India, attacking Sikhs, attacking Hindus, attacking Buddhists, attacking anyone who's not Muslim. And of course, they're attacking Christian missionaries in India, they're attacking the Mother Teresa's, they're attacking anyone who has to do anything with the British government. And the British were basically clueless as to what was going on. The British, just thought, oh, you had a bunch of crazy, mullahs are going crazy here, so they would send the army into what they called the northwest frontier, which is now Afghanistan, and you had these various wars, and the British were ruthless in putting them down. And when the British put down several of these revolts, the followers of Wahhab said, we can't beat the British right now with guns, but we're going to set up these schools to teach our children. Actually, we're going to teach our sons, because needless to say, the Wahhabs didn't have much place for women. And they built these madrasses, the schools, to train everybody in India in the teaching of Wahhab Saudi Arabia. So basically, if you think Saudi Arabia is nuts, basically the followers of Syed Ahmad brought the craziness of Saudi Arabia into India. Now, at the time, British India included what's now all of India, all of Pakistan, and all of Afghanistan. And in particular, there was so basically, after fighting and losing to the British for about 100 years, the followers of Wahhab in India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, which was then British India, they set up two basic schools or systems of schools in that entire area. One was called the followers of tradition, and I forget the name, but it's something, it's the Jamaat Ahl-i-Hadith was one radical group, and the other was a college or a seminary to train clerics in Deoband, India. So for the next 150 years, from 1866 until today, these thousands of schools and that Deoband, basically university, have been cranking out people in India and Pakistan and Afghanistan to basically dedicate their lives towards jihad, towards eliminating anyone who is not a follower of the Prophet, killing them, enslaving them, doing whatever they had to do to make sure that the whole world is Islamic. So again, something that I never knew, and I don't think most people know it, we all know about Saudi Arabia, how fanatic they have been, because if you want to know the face of the Saudi Arabian fanatics, You look at Osama bin Laden and the September 11th hijackers. That's who they are. But on a much more massive scale, you have had that going on in India and Pakistan and Afghanistan under the surface for more than 150 years. So fast forward, and by the way, these schools have, because they are disciples of the Saudi Arabian hero and religious leader Wahhab, they have been lavishly funded by the oil money from Saudi Arabia for the past 100 years. So when you look at the buildings, you can see that they're just lavish. They have plenty of money for their teachers, plenty of money for books, plenty of money for the fanciest video tools or video presentation. It's just spectacular what they do. So now fast forward to 1980, the Russians come into Afghanistan because they had a dispute with one of their people, one of the communists that they had set up there. And what you had in Afghanistan was the full force of the Wahhabs from Saudi Arabia, the Saudi Arabian money, and the Saudi Arabian intellects like Osama bin Laden, working together with the massive amounts of people in India and Pakistan and Afghanistan. And together they defeated the Russian army in Afghanistan. And of course, we Americans helped them do it by giving them our latest weapons and technology because we were fighting the Cold War. Russia was our enemy, so we did everything we could to help they called the Mujahideen, which were really the most fanatic, violent, intolerant brand of Islam you could possibly get. But now, because they have the Saudi Arabian money, and because now they defeated the Russians, and now they have defeated the United States, they consider themselves to be right back where they were in the days of when the Muslims were overrunning Spain and threatening to conquer all of Europe back in the 800s and the 900s. And we forget that that the Muslims basically conquered 1/3 of the known world in less than 100 years. Incredible. And then the second attack came with the Turks when they conquered Greece, the Eastern Roman Empire, came up, conquered chunks of Poland, and came right up to Vienna. And guess what day they were on the verge of conquering Vienna? It was September 11th, 1683. And they had blown up the walls around Vienna, about to conquer Vienna that day. And then they were suddenly pushed back. The Polish army of Jan Sobieski attacked from the rear, saved Europe, changed history. But I'm wandering on. But the main point I want to bring up is if the Taliban was our enemy, and Taliban, by the way, comes from the Arabic word talib, which means student. So the Taliban were the students. But who were the teachers? The teachers were the fanatic Wahhab preachers of Pakistan, together with the fanatic Wahhab preachers of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabian money, the Indian massive amounts of people. So they trained the Taliban. In fact, if you look at the Wikipedia site for Taliban, it'll say that they are a Deobandi, of the Deobandi Islamic group. Of course, that's that seminary in Deoband, India, which was built on the principles of Wahhab. So you have the Pakistanis Wahhabs, the Saudi Arabian Wahhabs, inspiring, organizing, training, teaching the Taliban, their students. And yet when George Bush got Americans into Afghanistan, he did everything in cooperation with our moderate Islamic allies, right? Saudi Arabia, they were our friends. Pakistan, they were our friends. So now do you understand why nobody in Afghanistan trusted us? Because they all know that if you go against the Taliban and they find out about it, you're going to get killed. But if you work for the Americans, you know that the Americans are sharing all their information with the Saudi Arabians and the Pakistanis. So you'd have to be an idiot to put your life and your future in the hands of the Americans. And by the way, remember when we invaded Afghanistan in 2001 and we were looking for Mullah Omar, we were looking for Osama bin Laden, and somehow we couldn't find them, they just disappeared. And then we find out that Osama bin Laden was living comfortably in Pakistan for like 10, 15 years before we finally went after him. That was our Pakistani allies who inspired the Taliban. They were all friends. Remember the the airlift of evil? We had about 2,000 or 3,000 of the top Taliban and top Al-Qaeda leaders were in the city of Kunduz, and we surrounded the city. And what did we Americans do? We just sat there for 3 weeks and had that airlift to take all the leaders of the people who were killing us and get them safely to Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. And I don't even have to tell you about the 6 prisoners that we released, that they were in Guantanamo because they had sworn to kill every American, and we let them go. So we could get a deserter back, Bergdorf. So the whole thing makes no sense, but yet we have the best and brightest experts have been running this policy in Afghanistan for 20 years. And the fact that you just have a bunch of ordinary people like us at Liberty and Prosperity meeting for breakfast, reading, talking, discussing things, and somehow we get insight that the experts don't have. And that's what America used to be all about. Ordinary citizens of average intelligence being honest with each other, being open with each other, talking things out, ending up being smarter and better informed than the elites who make a living, who specialize in those things, just like Ben Franklin said. I'm Seth Grossman for libertyandprosperity.com.